After a crowdfunding campaign to inject additional life and content into its premier racing title, Reza Studios released a rebranded and updated take on their highly praised title, game Stock Car Extreme. But does their attempt to revitalise their existing flagship title offer enough new features to go head-to-head with the heavyweights in the racing genre, or does it fall short, almost being a prequel to bigger and better things to come? Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Test Drive. Today I'll be showing you Automobilista. So if it's a title you're contemplating grabbing and want to learn a bit more about, stay tuned. And if you're anyway interested in car or racing titles, be sure to check out my other review and comparison videos. If you were to build a racing game from the ground up, one would assume you'd want it to include some of the most popular racing circuits and vehicles from around the world. Developer Reza Studios have gone against this norm and yet somehow still managed to create one of the most promising and enjoyable titles in the racing genre. In June 2015, having just finalised a licensing deal with Image Space Incorporated for their ISI motor source code, a move that enabled them to modify the engine on which game Stock Car Extreme was built, Reza Studios launched a crowdfunding campaign for their premier racing title. Their proposal to breathe additional life into their highly praised yet underrated simulation was met with a positive response, with Reza not only meeting but exceeding their original funding goal. The campaign also hinted how they were developing a completely new racing title, but clearly stated that the development of their new title was not the focus of their campaign. In February 2016, after a beta phase that saw features updated and tweaked to the crowdfunding backers, Automobilista was officially released on Steam. Now, developer Reza Studios aren't new to the racing genre. Having created content for ISI's R-Factor, they went on to develop game Stock Car in its various iterations, including Formula Truck 2013 and the free-to-play title Copa Petrobras de Marcus. Automobilista can be viewed as the culmination and grand sum of these titles, and where it's often seen or labelled as a rebranded version of Stock Car Extreme, almost a game Stock Car Extreme 1.5, it does add new tracks, cars, improve on physics, tweak graphics, and update the user interface. Jumping into Automobilista for the first time, I found myself somewhat impressed and a little confused at the car and track selection list. As the successor of game Stock Car Extreme, Automobilista brings Brazil's premier race series, Stock Car Brazil, and faithfully reproduces and includes the 2015 season's cars, tracks, and drivers. Now, unless you're from Brazil and follow the series, the car and track lineup may seem completely foreign to you. Yet it's this divergence from the norm that is both one of Automobilista's biggest strengths and its biggest weakness. Knowing that I was entering my first stock car championship on the real tracks of the Brazilian stock car season gave the game a sense of authenticity that a lot of other titles lack when replicating a season or series championship, and it was this sense of exploring and finding the limits of unseen and unheard of corners that became to me one of Automobilista's most rewarding experiences. There's a sense of achievement and satisfaction when finding the limits to real world corners that you've never driven before in a racing title, and during my first season I could best explain my experiences to that of what a rookie would feel, hesitantly and nervously competing in their first real world racing series, nervously driving out of the pits into an unknown track for the first time. I felt the sense of needing to prove myself against the competition and the pressure to learn the track during the practice session and be competitive for both qualifying and the race gave Automobilista a sense of authenticity and realism. For this alone, I'd have to take my hats off to Reza and give them huge credit. Now, what would this experience be like without a faithful and rewarding driving model? The physics, force feedback, and car handling are, in my opinion, some of the best in the racing genre. Now, stock car V8s are not a series or car I'm particularly interested in, but pushing them to their limits on corners and tracks that I had never driven before, to have them dancing and skipping around through corners, feeling elevation changes and corner bumps, load and unload the suspension and tyres through my force feedback steering wheel was what I could best describe as captivating. There's just a sense of realism and reward that makes you feel that what you're experiencing is real and authentic. If you're a gamepad user, however, word of warning, the steering wheel is recommended for the full enjoyment of a racing simulator of this level. To the point, I'd say you're better off sticking to a more gamepad friendly title. Automobilista, however, isn't just a one-make racing title, and although I've harped on long enough about its most authentic racing series, other classes are strongly represented. Automobilista offers a base selection of around 30 vehicles, and one of their most spectacular selection is their reproduction of open-wheel Formula 1 cars over the past few decades. Automobilista's selection of Formula 1 cars range from those found in the golden age of F1, the 80s turbo era, V12s of the 90s, high-revving V10s and V8s to the present-day turbo V6s. As spectacular and rewarding these vehicles are to drive, excluding their branded Pirelli and Bridgestone tyre logos, branding and official licensing is missing. Automobilista's selection of Formula 1 vehicles is completed and transformed, however, with the addition of user-created liveries. So if you're an F1 fan, these skin packs transform the title, adding a sense of authenticity and branding that isn't available from the base content selection. Automobilista's base track selection, although complementing the Stock Car Brazil series, diverges from the norm of your regular racing title. Reza haven't jumped through hoops in an attempt to replicate and bring tracks that have been overplayed in just about every other racing title. You won't find the Nordschleife, you won't find the Nürburgring GP circuit, you won't find Monza or even Silverstone. The base track selection could be said to be Automobilista's weakest points, heavily favouring series racing found from within Brazil. It's this lack of heavily marketable and identifiable tracks that may be the cause of many to simply overlook and discredit the title. With that being said, jumping into my first Stock Car V8 series and attempting to fight for a championship on the various Brazilian race circuits made me realise just how many amazing, undiscovered and unheard of tracks Brazil has. The tracks people may recognise include those popularised in Formula 1, including Brazil's Interlagos, Canada's Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, Japan's Suzuka and Austria's Red Bull Ring. Additional DLCs add Italy's Imola and British tracks Brands Hatch, Alton Park and Cadwell Park. When it comes to Automobilista's car selection list, you do feel a heavy bias towards open-wheel race cars, and Reza have dodged catering for road car enthusiasts, with the exception of including a 5th-generation Chevrolet Camaro. This asserts the title's appeal to those favouring race cars as opposed to those that favour high performance or exotic road vehicles. My two favourite vehicles from Automobilista's selection though include the Super V8s and the Stadium Super Trucks. The Super V8s are an unbranded reproduction of Australia's premier race series, the V8 SuperCar Championship, and once you download skin packs for these vehicles, the Super V8s are transformed into something that feels authentic, branded and entirely captivating. Flying around Bathurst to me felt like the most accurate representation of what it would be like to drive a V8 supercar, with it dancing and squirming over crests and bumps, almost flying and gliding over the track in certain places. Then there's the Stadium Super Trucks. If you haven't seen these vehicles in real life, prepare to be blown away and left in disbelief. There are times you feel like these vehicles aren't driven and raced, but flown, and the translation of suspension travel under braking through corners is representative to how I've seen them behave when watching them racing on TV. It's these vehicles that may just be the most left field and extravagant cars to drive when it comes to sim racing. These things are absolutely awesome. Another favourite of mine are the assortment of caterhams found in Automobilista's BritPack DLC. The pack also includes 3 British tracks which seem suited and fitting for these vehicles. The pack also includes several versions of the Altima GTR supercar, and in combination with some of the road-going caterhams, adds a much-needed yet still underrepresented road car flavour to the title. I can't help but feel that this pack shouldn't be a separate DLC, but included in the base content to really strengthen Automobilista's lineup for new players. Automobilista also features day-night cycles, and these can be quite spectacular and somewhat suited to favouring endurance-style racing. What is missing though is rain, so if endurance racing is your thing and replication of varying weather conditions is a must for your racing needs, take this into account. Next, I want to touch on Automobilista's career mode, or lack thereof. If you're wanting to grab this title expecting a Gran Turismo or Forza-like career experience, this game isn't for you. A lot of the more hardcore simulation titles will either fail at creating a rewarding career mode or completely disregard it as an option. I can't help but think that a gaming developer's lack of creativity in coming up with a rewarding narrative for the user to enjoy is something holding back a lot of the hardcore simulation titles from mainstream popularity. With that being said, playing through the various seasons of the Brazilian race categories was some of the most fun I've ever had in a racing simulator in single player mode. With me somewhat professing my love for Automobilista's single-player season, I better address the AI. When set at the right strength level, they're more than capable of providing you with what I'd like to define as a target to chase down or attempt to stay ahead of. It's when racing side by side that they can come unstuck, and there are times you're on the racing line on a straight and they'll suddenly move into you. It's almost a toss-up whether this is more acceptable than AI that bungee jump out of your way in an attempt to avoid you. Multiplayer is supported, and it's here where Automobilista truly comes alive. Be prepared to search for leagues to join a race on set dates and times for the best experience, rather than having the expectation of being able to jump and find a full field of other players to race against instantly. Another feature that I love is the time trial mode, which records and tracks global lap times and records. I love how the feature is integrated within the base game and is a great way to compare your times to other drivers. So what's Automobilista like when it comes to eye candy and visual appeal? Being based on DirectX 9, there are times Automobilista may not appear to fire on all cylinders. There are times it can look dated or not quite right, but there are times it can look stunning. What it does do, however, is come across as being convincing enough. And when looking for a simulation title, graphics are often not the primary focus or a concern. When it comes to Automobilista's user interface and menu-based selection screens, I do feel like they're a small step up from Game Stock Car Extreme, but at times still cluttered and claustrophobic, with a single screen often attempting to cram in as many options and checkboxes as possible. The base HUD when racing is another area of concern, and while almost looking as bad as R-Factor 2's base HUD, it can easily be switched to a far more visually appealing and modern DIN HUD. If you're not happy with the DIN HUD layout, there's always the option of modifying or rearranging it. Unfortunately, this isn't the most convenient of options, as you're required to dig into Automobilista's install folders and launch a standalone editor. Finally, let me comment on mods and how it really opens up and transforms this title. A simple and single download for an 18-track mega pack converts Automobilista's somewhat unheard of track selection list to what it should have been in the first place. If you're going to get Automobilista, you need this pack. Be sure to check out the list of cars and tracks available on Race Department's forums for a taste of what's out there. So, what are my final thoughts on Automobilista? This, to me, is a title that seems to punch well above its weight compared to the competition, catering for more the hardcore player who places physics, driving feel, and the emotions of fighting over a full race weekend ahead of huge car and track selection lists. It's for the more discerning player, one who can't be convinced and won over with cutting-edge graphics or the addition of a Ferrari and Porsche badge. If you class yourself as being a fan of the sim racing genre, do yourself a favour and grab this title. That there was my review of Automobilista. I hope you enjoyed their video. If you did, be sure to hit the like button, and if you want to see more videos like this from me in the future, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you all again next time.